What if I told you that just a few twists in history could have completely changed the voice of Europe? Imagine London, Paris, and Berlin not filled with the sound of church bells, but with the call to prayer echoing from every tower, minarets instead of cathedrals, Qur'ans instead of Bibles. Sounds strange now, almost impossible to imagine, right? But once, it was so close to becoming reality that for a moment in history, it seemed only a matter of time. Muslim armies, united under mighty empires, had already crossed deserts, rivers, and mountains, smashing great kingdoms one after the other. They ruled continents, they built cities of gold and marble, they commanded the greatest fleets of their time. And yet, they never conquered and ruled all of Europe. Why? What stopped them? Was it a miracle sent to protect Europe? Was it the unmatched power of Europe's defenders? Or was it something far more hidden? A weakness that even the Muslims did not want to speak about? To understand this mystery, we need to go back to the days when the Islamic Empire was expanding like a tidal wave, swallowing lands at a speed that terrified the world. In less than a century after the birth of Islam, the Muslim armies had achieved what no one thought was possible. They had crushed the mighty Persian Empire, an empire that had ruled for centuries. From the earliest days of Islam's expansion, the Muslim gaze was fixed firmly on the continent of Europe. And at Europe's doorstep stood a single defiant sentinel, Constantinople, the impregnable capital of the Byzantine Empire. This city was not only a political and economic hub, it was the shield guarding the heart of Europe from the surging tide of Islam. Every Muslim knew the words of the Muhammad, "Constantinople will surely be conquered, and how excellent will be the commander who conquers it, and how excellent will be his army." These words were more than prophecy. They were a call to action, inspiring generations of warriors to cross land and sea in pursuit of that ultimate victory. The Muslim march into Europe began with daring expeditions into Byzantine lands. Early caliphs sent armies across Asia Minor, pushing ever closer to the European frontier. The first great attempt on Constantinople's mighty walls came during the caliphate of Uthman ibn Affan. Siege engines rolled up to the city's fortifications, and the black banners of Islam fluttered within sight of Europe's greatest fortress. But the Byzantines, masters of defense, held firm. Their triple walls stood like mountains, and their infamous Greek fire, a burning liquid that clung to ships and flesh alike, turned back even the bravest assaults. When Umayyad king Emir Muawiyah rose to power, he realized that conquering Europe would require more than land armies. It needed control of the Mediterranean itself. This was the highway to Europe's coasts, the back door to Constantinople, and the key to cutting deep into European territory. Under his vision, the Muslims built the first great Islamic navy, a fleet strong enough to challenge Byzantine dominance at sea. Soon, Muslim warships were striking directly at European holdings, seizing Cyprus, capturing Rhodes, raiding the Aegean Islands, and even striking the shores of modern-day Greece. These were no longer defensive skirmishes. They were bold, calculated offensives deep into Europe's maritime borders. With every island captured and every raid launched, the message was clear. The Muslim advance was no longer confined to Asia or Africa. The gates of Europe had been tested, its coastlines breached, and its greatest city besieged. Constantinople still stood, but it now lived under the shadow of an unstoppable force pressing in from both land and sea. They broke the back of the Byzantine Empire, taking its richest provinces. They swept across North Africa, city by city, their banners flying high in the desert wind. And by the year 711 AD, they stood at the very edge of Europe, staring across the narrow waters of the Strait of Gibraltar. It was here that a man named Tariq ibn Ziyad stepped into history. Leading an army of just 7,000 Berber soldiers, he crossed into Spain. As soon as they landed, he did something that shocked even his own men. He ordered the ships to be burned. The flames lit up the night sky as the wooden decks cracked and collapsed into the sea. With the waves at their backs and the enemy in front, Tariq told his soldiers, "The sea is behind you, the enemy ahead. Fight, and you will live with honor. Run, and the sea will claim you. Retreat was no longer an option. At the Battle of Guadalete, this small force faced the Visigoth army, far larger and heavily armed, but the Muslims fought with speed and skill. In the heat of the battle, dust rose into the air, the clash of swords echoed, and the Visigoth king fell. In only 3 years, the whole of Spain was in Muslim hands. The land was renamed Al-Andalus, and it became a shining jewel of wealth, science, and beauty. At that moment, it seemed like Europe itself was about to be conquered, but under the glittering surface, cracks were already forming. The army that took Spain wasn't a single united family. It was a mix of Arabs, Berbers, and newly converted locals. Arabs ruled at the top, holding most of the power. Berbers often felt like second-class citizens despite their sacrifices in battle. Converts, too, had fewer rights. These divisions were like hidden cracks in a dam, invisible at first, but dangerous when pressure builds. Far in the north of Spain, in the cold, rugged mountains of Asturias, a Visigoth noble named Pelagius refused to give up. Gathering just 300 loyal fighters, he waited for his moment. In 718, at Covadonga, his tiny force ambushed a much larger Muslim army. Arrows rained down from the cliffs, rocks rolled onto soldiers climbing the slopes, and the Muslim force, 10 times larger, was forced to retreat. Militarily, it was a small battle, but symbolically, it was the first spark of resistance. It was the seed of the Christian Reconquista, a struggle that would last for 800 years. The true turning point, however, came in 732 AD. Muslim forces under Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi marched deep into France. The dream was alive. If they could win here, the road to Paris was open. On the other side stood Charles Martel, leader of the Franks, a man whose nickname was the Hammer. For 7 long days, the two armies stared each other down. The Muslims had their fast cavalry, the Franks had their shield walls. Then came the mistake. Muslim scouts failed to spot hidden Frankish troops lying in wait in the forests, where the trees were so thick that sunlight barely touched the ground. When the battle raged, these hidden troops struck like a trap snapping shut. In the chaos, Abd al-Rahman was killed. Without their leader, the Muslim army fell apart. The road to Paris was closed forever. But this was about more than just one lost battle. It revealed a deeper problem. The empire was too big, too fast. From Spain in the west to the borders of India in the east, it was impossible to control everything at once. Rebellions erupted everywhere. In Morocco, Berber tribes rose up. In Damascus, the ruling Umayyads were overthrown by the Abbasids in a wave of blood and assassinations. The unity of the Muslim world was shattering at the very moment Europe was slowly learning how to fight back. In Spain, Al-Andalus began to break apart. Europe's survival against huge Muslim invasions is a story full of tough geography, betrayals, endless wars, naval disasters, and unshakable determination. Think of the Pyrenees and Alps, giant natural walls turning into deadly traps for invaders. In 718 AD at Covadonga, a small band of 300 rebels led by Pelagius hid in the caves of Asturias and attacked Muslim armies many times larger, using the high mountain passes to wipe them out. At the same time, the Muslim Caliphate was breaking apart from inside. By 750 AD, Arab rulers were looking down on their Berber soldiers, and new Muslim converts were burdened with heavy taxes. When Abd al-Rahman I escaped to Spain, he spent 30 years putting down rebellions, but even after that, the Muslim rule broke into 23 small kingdoms called taifas that fought each other instead of defeating the Christians. Meanwhile, Europe's war system was getting stronger. In Al-Andalus, Muslims were debating science and astronomy, but across the border, Frankish knights were living only for battle. At the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212, Christian armies copied Muslim cavalry skills, but combined them with strong, unbreakable lines of infantry, built by a culture that had faced danger for centuries. The seas also worked against Muslim expansion. Strong Mediterranean storms destroyed invasion fleets, and in 1571 at the Battle of Lepanto, European Catholic forces destroyed 200 Ottoman ships in just 5 hours. Muslim ships, made mainly to carry soldiers, couldn't match the heavy cannons of Europe's warships. There was also a strange effect of conquest. When Muslims blended into local cultures, it made European identity even stronger. When Granada fell in 1492, King Ferdinand gave Muslims 3 choices: convert to Christianity, leave, or be killed. This created martyrs instead of allies and kept Christian determination alive through 800 years of the Reconquista. Leaders like Charles Martel, Byzantine Emperor Leo III, and the Spanish warrior El Cid united divided European kingdoms against the Muslim threat. On the other side, the Muslim world was weakened by Berber uprisings, racism between Arabs and Berbers, and endless civil wars, slowly draining their strength while Europe grew more powerful. But while Spain was falling, a new Muslim power had risen in the east, the Ottomans. For more than 800 years, Muslim armies had marched to the city's walls, inspired by the prophecy of Muhammad that Constantinople will surely be conquered. Time after time, the city withstood siege, protected by its colossal triple walls and the shimmering waters of the Bosphorus. But when Sultan Mehmed II, later known as Mehmed the Conqueror, ascended the Ottoman throne at just 21 years of age, he brought with him a vision as vast as his ambition. He surrounded the city by land and sea, deploying one of the most formidable armies of the age, supported by massive cannons capable of shaking the earth beneath Constantinople's walls. After weeks of relentless bombardment, fierce assaults, and naval blockades, on May 29, 1453, the great city fell. The crescent flag was raised above the Hagia Sophia. The capital of Byzantium became the jewel of the Ottoman Empire, and the gateway to Europe lay in Muslim hands. The Ottomans swept through Eastern Europe, taking Greece, Serbia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. By 1529, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent stood before Vienna, the very gateway to Germany. If Vienna fell, all of Central Europe might follow. But the siege failed. The weather turned against them, supply lines stretched too thin, and the defenders fought with desperation. The Ottomans tried again in 1683. For 2 long months, Vienna was under siege. People inside were starving, eating rats and insects to survive. Ottoman engineers dug tunnels under the walls, packing them with gunpowder. But a Polish miner discovered the plan and flooded the tunnels just in time. At dawn, King John Sobieski of Poland led 20,000 winged hussars, cavalrymen with giant wings on their backs that made a terrifying sound as they charged. In one of the largest cavalry attacks in history, they smashed into the Ottoman army, breaking it completely. That day marked the last time a Muslim army would come so close to the heart of Europe. The seas told a similar story. In 1571, at the Battle of Lepanto, the once dominant Ottoman navy faced the Christian Holy League. In just 5 hours, over 200 Ottoman ships were destroyed and 20,000 men drowned. The Mediterranean, once an Ottoman lake, was no longer theirs. So, why did Muslims fail to conquer all of Europe? The reasons are many. Internal divisions between Arabs and Berbers, endless rebellions that drained strength, an empire that grew too fast to defend itself, geography that favored Europe, the mountains, the rivers, the harsh winters, Europe learning and adapting Muslim tactics, naval defeats that cut off supply routes, and strong leaders like Charles Martel, Pelagius, John Sobieski, and the Byzantine emperors who knew how to rally their people when it mattered most. Muslims did rule parts of Europe for centuries, Spain for almost 800 years, the Balkans under the Ottomans for 500 years. But the great capitals of Vienna, Paris, and Rome never fell to them. And in the end, Europe's greatest strength was its own chaos. Its kingdoms fought each other endlessly, but when faced with an outside enemy, they could unite just enough to survive. When your back is to the Atlantic Ocean, there's no choice. You fight like there's no tomorrow. History is not just the story of what happened. It's also the story of what almost happened, And the story of why Muslims never conquered all of Europe is one of those moments where the world stood at a crossroads and destiny took a different turn.